Oh,
There we go. We're good. We're good. Awesome. Hi, y'all. Thank you for coming out today. I know it is very early. But
Are you ready?
yes.
I'm going to introduce it. All right, our next presenter is Miles Collier. Title of the presentation is Chronoqueer, Speculative, Temporalities, and Queer Resistance. Wow, that was a mouthful.
A lot of
I
big
have to
words.
say that slowly. That's a warm welcome.
Thank you all for coming out today. My name is Miles, and before I get started, I do have a available version if you'd like to follow along. That'll lead you to a Google Drive with an accessibility version of this script that I'm reading from, but also just the slides as well. So we live in a world where time is very measured, where our bodies are organized by time, and where our concepts of temporality kind of relies on clear lines drawn between the past, present, and future. So those who are able to thrive in this super fast-paced world that we live in now are very, very few and far between. But like a deconstruction of how we conceive of time seems very, very far-fetched. So how can we do this? And to answer that, I turn, as I do to many things, to speculative fiction. So I argue that the destabilization of like normative time in speculative fiction, queer speculative fiction may directly serve as a form of queer resistance. By utilizing speculative temporalities, queer creatives resist the intersecting oppressions of chrononormativity in a heteronormative society. That is a lot of big words, so I'm going to break them down. Speculative fiction can be kind of defined as any fiction that concerns itself with the what if. So we've got fantasy, we've got sci-fi, we've got horror, we've got like magical realism. All of those things exist under the spec-fic umbrella. And so one of the incredible things about speculative fiction is that it has so much subversive potential. It has the ability, I'm going to read this quote. So speculative fiction is a great place to warp the mirror and thus impel the reader to view differently things they've taken for granted. Hopkinson refers to the technique of defamiliarization, where the familiar is literally made unfamiliar to evoke a new, different, potentially uncomfortable or unsettling experience. Speculative fiction forces us to look at things with new eyes. It invites us to consider possibilities outside of the dominant ones fed to us, and from speculative fiction, we see our realities made audible, tangible, and visible. Not just the realities that we are told exist, but our lived, embodied realities rooted in our daily experiences and personal identities. So, speculative fiction is essential, or speculation is essential to any social justice work. Walida Amarisha writes that whenever we try to envision a world without war, without violence, without prisons, without capitalism, we are engaging in speculative fiction. As a result, speculative fiction provides many queer people the space to imagine alternatives to our present world, not only as an escapist fantasy, but as a means to imagine and enact alternate ways of surviving. Queer engagement with speculative fiction does not solely exist in the realm of entertainment, escapism, or just enjoyment. Rather, it offers possibilities for navigating, engaging with, and potentially altering the structures that surround us. So one such structure is time. Scholars have examined time for literal ages, ironically, and while I also ironically don't have a lot of time to dive into some of the theories surrounding time today, there are a couple things that kind of guide the way this research is unfolded. And I also had to include Dr. legally. So the issue. Chrononormativity describes the expectations placed upon an individual to exist within a particular normative timeline, time flow. So it refers to the use of time to organize individual human bodies towards maximum productivity. So time basically binds us to all we do. According to Elizabeth Freeman, who is a scholar that I have drawn a lot from for this work, naked flesh is bound into socially meaningful embodiment through temporal regulation. Basically, we are regulated based off of time. You can think of how we think of our lifetimes. We have the expectation of, oh, you're gonna graduate high school, and then you're gonna go to college, and you're gonna find a nice man, and you're gonna settle down, and you're gonna have a lot of kids, and then grandkids, and blah, 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 blah. That linear and, I guess, normative timeline will not apply to every single person. Not every single person will experience that time flow. And so the regulation of bodies through a chrononormative progression of time, as a result, creates systemic hierarchies. So it values those who conform to a linear or normative progression of time and marginalizes those who do not. There's a lot of additional work on this done in disability studies with stuff around crib time, For the purposes of this, I'm focusing a little bit more on queer time, but crip time is absolutely essential to how I came to this. So, queer time, then, invites us to question our constructions of time that are centered kind of within the body. So Jack Halberstam defines queer time as those specific models of temporality that emerge once one leaves the temporal frame of bourgeois reproduction and family, longevity, risk, safety, and inheritance. So it's time unbound by normative framings of relationality, unbound by heteronormativity. If queer theory problematizes the structure that reinforces and values heteronormativity, then queer temporal theory and queer time problematizes the framing of time in terms of, reproductive temporality. So it's the time associated with reproduction, child rearing, fertility. Furthermore, it also problematizes heteronormative expectations surrounding relationships, sexuality, identity development, and it moves away from a linear understanding of time to something that's a little more nuanced, fluid, flexible. So, queer relationships with temporality are very complicated. Our understandings of maturity, growth, and adulthood are deeply tied to heteronormative expectations surrounding relationships to others and self. For queer adults, the heteronormative fantasy of adulthood is rife with expectations that they may deem not only inaccessible, but also undesirable. Queer kids, though, may feel left behind by seemingly more mature peers, as they are unable to occupy the reproductive trajectories that are held up as the norm even for young children. These are both from a, it's linked in the folder that I shared, just kidding. So this actually leads to a sense of liminality, asynchronicity, and disjointedness, especially as queer kids watch their heterosexual peers grow up around them. So in speculative fiction, we are offered the ability to see visibly the often invisible temporal trauma experienced by queer people. Defamiliarization, visual and auditory manipulation, and the speculative elements offered by genre fiction aid in conveying the felt experience of queer folk. For the final few minutes of this presentation, I plan to look at two pieces of queer art that are both my favorites. So I Saw the TV Glow and a short story from Octavia's Brood called Evidence by Alexis Pauline Gumbs. And I want to break down their use of queer time and what they're doing there. And so in doing this, I hope that I can illustrate how speculative fiction's use of funky time can kind of aid in both depicting and resisting chrononormativity. Those are my examples. I should skip to that slide sooner. So, I Saw the TV Glow is a deeply personal film that centers transness, media, and the very literal static in its exploration of identity. So static is horror in I Saw the TV Glow. The audience knows that change may be what the protagonist needs, but we wait for a change that will never come. One of the many speculative elements throughout the film is the use of time. I Saw the TV Glow follows a teenager, Owen, as he becomes obsessed with a TV show, The Pink Opaque. He sneaks out to watch it with his friend Maddie, and she begins leaving him tapes of the episodes before just vanishing. Years later, Maddie returns, and she finds Owen and tells him that their lives are fictional, that they are actually the characters from the show that they were obsessed with. And they have been buried under the earth and are suffocating there by the show's big bad, Mr. Melancholy. He's the moon, the man in the moon. That's him. He's creepy. So it's Maddie who actually points out the strangeness of time at first. This is the quote that made me go down this whole rabbit hole. After she returns, she is talking to Owen, and she asks if time ever seems like it's not moving normally, like it's all out of whack. The film distorts, it flashes between the past and present. Owen finds Maddie again in the, where is it? The like kind of top left image, in their school's planetarium. And she insists that time wasn't right. It was moving too fast. And then I was 19, and then I was 20. I felt like one of those dolls, asleep in the supermarket, stuffed. And then I was 21, like chapters skipped over on a DVD. Time, in a very literal sense, moves differently between the world that they are forced into and the world they belong in. Minutes in the world of the show, become years in the midnight realm, the real world where they are trapped. And time itself becomes out of sync. In the end, we actually see a moment where Owen is surrounded by entirely just frozen bodies screaming for help. So this ties into the feeling of being out of sync, the disjointedness, the asynchronicity that comes with growing up and feeling like you are literally out of sync with your peers. So the queerness, like I said, queerness of I Saw the TV Glow's time dives directly into the feelings of disjointedness experienced by many queer folk. Although time progresses, we may feel buried by it. We may feel we have to experience it all at once, incredibly fast. or time may drag, much as it does for Owen. By translating queer asynchronicity into something visual, the suffocating, horrifying reality of having your identity buried is revealed. However, not all speculative time is as heart-wrenching as I saw the TV glow. While we can depict visually the often invisible temporal trauma experienced by queer folk, we can also explore possibilities for queer lives and futures unbound by normative times. By looking to queer utopias, we imagine a future where queerness exists, thereby resisting present and persisting erasure. So, Evidence by Alexis Pauline Gumbs is a short story composed of archival exhibits, featuring moments from Gumbs' own fictionalized past, present, and future. We see the lectures and research of Alandrix, so Gumbs' descendant, on Gumbs herself. And then there's also a letter from a 12-year-old Alandrix, thank you, alongside a letter from Alexis after capitalism to Alexis during capitalism. In Evidence, temporality is less rooted in the societal expectations of normative lifetime and more rooted in the interconnectedness and simultaneity of past, present, and future, the role of kinship and the role of narrative. So Freeman draws from Judith Butler when she writes about a shift in our understanding of temporality, identifying the change from a non-narrative, future-oriented model of iteration to a more narrative, past-oriented model of allegorization, in which the material byproducts of past failures write the poetry of a different future. So rather than ordering things in terms of iteration, past-oriented narrative invites the imagination of future possibilities, using the past as a framework through which we can navigate the present and future. By collapsing the divides between past, present, and future, and by looking at them all as very crucial, interconnected, often simultaneous pieces of whole story, we are actually engaging in the process of queering time, which is pretty cool. Evidence does this by blurring the lines of ancestry and descendancy, invoking the very literal poetry of a different future through the uniquely queer interaction between those archived in the story. So, yeah, right now it is crucially important to engage with queerness in media, whether fictional or nonfiction. As you do, I invite you to look at temporality. What does it reveal about our relationship with time? By utilizing speculative temporalities, queer creatives resist the pressure of chrononormativity. But by engaging with speculative temporalities, we too are offered alternatives, inviting us to view differently the things we've taken for granted, like time. To conclude, I would like to share a quote from a trans poetry anthology I feel is deeply appropriate here. We are less bound by time than the clock in 12 years. Thank you. And then there's a QR code.